Good morning. The July 13th Board of Education meeting is now in session. Please rise for the invocation. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. The pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we start, I just want to welcome Eric Grannon and Carolyn Williams to the dais. We're so happy to have you here. Item 2.03 is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? All those in favor? Okay. Item 2.04 is establish agenda order, and the agenda stands as published. Item 2.05 are recognitions, and we do not have any today. Item 2.06, school and community highlights. I don't know that we've had a lot of school and community highlights in the last couple of weeks now that school's out, but I did have a chance to attend the leadership conference at Anne Arundel Community College, which was just a wonderful morning, at least that I got to spend there with a great keynote speaker and the swearing in of our 2 new board members last week, which was always fun. Mrs. Sasek.
I also had the opportunity to attend, I think it was last Monday, that we went to the farm endeavor that is happening with the Glen Burnie elementary school, Brooklyn Park Middle School. It was really outstanding. Plus, Karen is the name of our new president of the Maryland superintendents.
I'm sorry, so Dr. Karen Salmon.
Yes. Yeah, and she was present, and yeah, and basically it's a relationship about a local farm, a Maryland farm that supplies the food for our schools, and at the same time, since that north part of the county is considered very dry as far as vegetables and fresh fruit, they were there and they were selling their produce, and they do this once a month on a Monday. Is that correct?
I believe it is 8 Mondays. During the summer, so there's 8 Mondays during the summer that we'll have the farm stands there available, as well as some other educational opportunities. Though it's also in conjunction with our libraries and the public libraries.
Yeah. So if you live in the North County, I must tell you the fruit was gorgeous. The vegetables were gorgeous. I did go shopping.
All right, the next part of our meeting is the public comment portion of the meeting. Anyone wishing to speak on an item not on today's agenda may offer testimony during this public comment portion of the meeting. Speakers will be allotted 3 minutes each, and the board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be watching or viewing the meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. This time is intended for speakers to voice their opinion and not necessarily as a question and answer period. Speakers may pose questions, but answers will be counted toward the 3-minute allotment. For the record, please give your name before speaking, and handouts should be given to the board assistant. I have 2 cards today, Rita Vasquez and Angela Nambias.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Buenos dias. My name is Angela Nambiar. I am the Multicultural Programming and Outreach Liaison for the Anne Arundel County Public Library. And I am here today to talk a little bit about the SRC, that is the Summer Reading Club that we are having right now during the summer at our libraries. And this year, our theme is On Your Mark, Get Set, Read. And you can see my t-shirt. And one of the goals of SRC, or Summer Reading Club, is to support the school system. And how? SRC helps to prevent the summer slide that we all know very well it happens when our children, when our students are during the summer holidays. This year, we have a new and very amazing and wonderful feature that is the registration. We can register between June 6 and August 13 using a new system that is called Beanstack. Now we can register online on our website, that is www.aacpl.net. We can also use our phones to register. That is something new that we are implementing this year in our county. Beanstack also works as a reader advisory tool, so you can register and you will get notifications about new titles that you could read. So it's an advisory tool. And it's open for all ages, from 0 to 100 years old. You can use it. This summer, during SRC, we will have great performances. We will have also musical concerts, games like the scavenger hunt, and many other things. And all the information could be found on Happenings, that is on our newsletter, that you can get at our 15 branches as well as online. We also will have weekly coupons. We will have, if you read for 5 weeks between July 11 to August 13, you will get a free book. So we are giving free books to everybody. So that is also something new for our library. On June 10th, we had a great event at the Piney Orchard Elementary in which we promote our online registration, and it was a great success. So today is the first meeting in which our library is here participating, because we have so many wonderful things to share with you. So since now on, you will see a representation from our library. And again, I want to thank you on behalf of the library for all your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for helping us with the summer slide. Is Rita still here? Okay.
Good morning, President Corbalak, Dr. Arlotto, and board members. My name is Rita Vasquez, and I am the proud parent of a 2016 Glen Burnie High School graduate and an incoming junior. Today, I come to seek your support in keeping music alive. Our high school and both middle schools have lost music positions for the 2016-17 school year. A cause for this decrease in music opportunities is a direct result of apparent low enrollment. This may not be a new topic for you, but it has become one for me. When music students at Glen Burnie High were informed of the cut in our music teacher's position, their reaction was, "We won't have a band." And although instrumental music was not completely eliminated, opportunities for many students, including my daughter, have been or will be. This includes, but is not limited to, auditioning for all county band and orchestra, all state band and orchestra, and our BSO side by side. When I first heard about this from parents and staff, my first thought was it's a funding issue. And my reaction was, we can handle this. You know firsthand that when it comes to our children, parents will go to great lengths to meet their needs, and fundraising becomes a team effort. As I looked further, I kept hearing that the problem was in scheduling, a task not within our reach. So the decline was not due to the lack of student interest, which resulted in low enrollment. It has been a direct impact from the current ABC class schedule in middle schools. This schedule treats middle school music programs as elective encore classes. So even when a student selected instrumental music as the first choice, it may not have been scheduled. At Corcoran Middle, this ongoing process has eliminated the 8th grade strings class. I was stunned to learn that Corcoran did not offer orchestra to 8th graders, and I wonder why these students could not have been scheduled with 6th or 7th grade. What I found encouraging was that these 8th grade students had spent their after-school time practicing with their teachers. Recently, several of our Glen Burnie High band and orchestra students began an evening mentoring program for elementary feeder students, and we hope to expand this to our middle schools. This is an effort to revive the interest in music. However, our students don't know that it is not a loss in the students' desire, but rather a loss in interest from our school system and administrators. One of my letters found its way to the Division of Curriculum, and the response from Assistant Superintendent Batten was that our music office is working to identify scheduling alternatives, and I truly believe they are doing their best. One alternative that will work is the AB class schedule currently in place at Brooklyn Park Middle and maybe another middle school. In the incoming year, Lindale has taken on the AB schedule. You must know that music is an essential avenue for self-expression and communication, and it can literally break down barriers when and where language is a challenge. The mission of Anne Arundel County Public Schools is to provide and ensure that all students have the access to programs where they can learn to value music through the acquisition of skills, knowledge, and concepts. This should not be limited to a general music class, and it certainly shouldn't deny them of greater avenues of success. Our instrumental music programs have become a reason why some students stay in school. They can be the pathway to college, and its members become extended families. As we strive to increase arts integrations, how can we not consider instrumental music an integral art piece in this process? It is with great concern that I am asking for your support regarding the future of our music programs, our instrumental music programs. The lack of external encouragement from our feeder schools is a serious threat to the survival of our program. I thank you for allowing me to express the need for student opportunity for levels of music instruction. And whatever you can do in the meantime, I urge you to act on our behalf for the sake of keeping music alive.
Thank you. I don't have any additional cards. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the board at this time? Okay. We'll move on to action items. Item 4.01, election of Board of Education officers for 2016-17. Mr. Gilliland.
Thank you, Madam President. It's my honor to move to re-elect Stacy Korbelak as president of the Board of Education for the 2016-2017 school year.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Maria, do you have discussion on this item? Or you're ready for the next one?
The next one.
Okay.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Motion passes 9-0-0. And thank you all for allowing me to serve you for a third year, or making me. Okay. It's really an honor. Thank you. Mrs. Sassa.
Madam President, I move to elect Julie Hummer as Vice President of the Board of Education for 2016-2017.
Do we have a second? All those in favor? Motion passes 9-0-0. And logistically, we need to take a short break so we can move buttons and nameplates around. So we'll be back 5-ish minutes. back. Okay, we'll move on to item 4.02, appointment of board counsel. And that's Mrs. Nally.
Madam President, I move to appoint the law firm of Carney, Cullen, Bresler, Bennett, and Scher as board counsel for 2016-2017.
All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Item 4.03, filling vacancies on the executive committee of the CAC. Mrs. Birch.
Madam President, I move that the board approve the 13 individuals listed to fill the vacancies on the executive committee of the Countywide Citizen Advisory Committee for 2016-2017.
All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Item 4.04 is administrative personnel appointments. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the personnel listed on the attached sheets be promoted and or appointed.
All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Item 4.05, personnel. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the board approve the actions as stipulated on the attached sheets.
So moved.
All those in favor? Motion passes 900. The next set of items on the agenda are policies. We have two up for third and final reading. Item 4.06, Professional Development Teachers Code GBM. We don't have any presentation. Is there any board questions or comments? Is there any public comment on this item? Oh, and I didn't even ask for your recommendation.
Well, then I'll give it to you.
Okay.
Yes, I
There's
would.
no comments.
I recommend the board approval of policy GBM, subject to final correction for style and format.
So moved.
And seeing there were no comments, all those in favor? Motion passes 900. Item 4.07 is the policy Student Behavior Interventions, Exclusion, Seclusion, and Physical Restraint, JK, also a third reading. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend the board approval of policy JK, subject to final correction for style and format.
So moved.
All right, Mrs. Hummer.
I just have a couple of questions on it, and I'd asked them before, but just asking again for some clarification. So the nonviolent crisis intervention that is offered, how often is the training for that for personnel offered?
The training is offered monthly, sometimes more than once a month. August and September and October, there are a lot more offerings. It's offered countywide, but also if a particular school is having a particular situation with a student who requires a lot of positive behavior supports, we will do training right there at the school if they need to quickly increase the number of people trained.
So schools can request
Yes,
as needed.
yes.
And so when we talk about staff that's trained for that, we're talking teachers, TAs, administrators, anyone.
Custodians, anyone who has regular contact with the student. And we expanded our cadre of trainers this summer from 14 to 30. So we have 30 people in the county available throughout all departments, student services, C&I, special education, available to train.
And I know some schools, based on their needs, have more people trained than others. What would you say the average is per school that we have trained?
The average is about 3 to 5, somewhere in there, but we have some schools based on student needs that have up to 17 people trained.
Right. So, but everybody has at least 2 or 3.
Yes, and we are marketing diligently this year to try to increase the number of people trained, because so much of it is about positive behavior supports and de-escalation of situations, so that we don't get into a situation where we need to be more assertive.
Right. And it's great that we can call in if they have a child that needs more, but it's better to have them already trained and be proactive on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would you all do me a favor and introduce yourselves just for the benefit of our new board members, please?
Yes. Jessica Kutches, Policy and Legislative Counsel.
Good morning. Bobby Pedrick, Director of Special Education.
Thank you.
Ms. Sasso.
I have a question in the regulation number 3, which states that the use of seclusion is prohibited in AACPS schools. And then it says seclusion may be used in approved non-public settings. Can you give me an example?
Oh, I'm sorry. We serve about 484 of our students with special needs in non-public schools. These are typically students who, the majority of them are placed in non-public schools for one of 2 reasons. Either they have plateaued in their skills and they're not advancing as we would wish academically, or oftentimes it's because of severe extreme behaviors that are highly aggressive. So the non-public schools in the state of Maryland fall under different regulations than the public schools, and so they make accommodations for those sites to sometimes offer things that we are not permitted to offer.
But what site would be a non-public school that we take care of?
So, for example, we send some students to Kennedy Krieger Institute in Baltimore, and they have a variety of locations. High Roads is a program that we use pretty frequently. There are about I believe right now there are about 26 different sites that we send students to. And we monitor, we have a whole staff that monitors those schools, visits, observes those students. Our effort is always to try to bring those students back to the public school system. We work very diligently with those non-public schools to build programs here in Anne Arundel County so that the students don't have to travel so far away from home.
But wouldn't those sites have their own regulations as far as seclusion?
Yes, they do, but it's all monitored very closely by the Maryland School Department.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Maryland State Department of Education.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 900. The next 3 policies are second readings. Item 4.08, salary deductions GACC. And there were no public comments during the 30-day posting, correct?
That's correct.
Is there any board questions or comments? Is there any public comment? All right, so we'll bring that back for third reading in August?
Yes.
Okay. Item 4.09 is second reading policy, classes of teacher certificates, GBE. Also no public comments during the 30-day posting. Is there any board questions or comments? Are there any public comments on this item? All right, so we'll see that in August. And item 4.10, second reading, part-time teachers, GBL. Also no public comments. Any board questions or comments? Any public comments on this item? All right, we'll see that in August. And the last section, we have 7 policies up for first reading. These are all information items. Item 4.11, interscholastic athletics, JJB. And we have a presentation.
Again, Jessica Kutches, Policy and Legislative Counsel.
Good morning, Clayton Kolb, Coordinator of Athletics.
Hi, Kathy Kubik, Office of School Performance.
The Athletics Office brings you policy JJB to you for first reading. The policy was last updated May 20th, 1991. The updated policy and the new regulation provides governing principles and references regarding the interscholastic athletics program with Anne Arundel County Public Schools. The policy will be posted on our website for 30 days for public comment, and we welcome any questions you have at this time.
I just had a question. When we put this up on the website for public comment, could we also link to the athletic handbook since the policy refers to it, just so they can have it right there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? All right, we will post it up on the web. Item 4.12 is policy JJ, extracurricular programs, first reading.
The Office of School Performance, the Division of Curriculum and Instruction, and the Division of Advanced Studies and Programs brings policy JJ to you for first reading. This policy was last updated May 20th, 1991, and the updated policy aligns with our non-discrimination policies related to our recognized protected classes. This policy will be on our website for 30 days for public comment, and we welcome any questions you have at this time.
Mrs. Birch.
I guess I couldn't find the old policy. There's just a little bit on the second page. Okay, thank you.
It was quite short.
Ms. Sasso?
I had a question on these extracurricular activities, and they have to do with basically activities that have to do with religion clubs. You know, if there is going to be a Christian club or a Muslim club, are they allowed?
We do have, we have had, I'm not sure how many schools currently sponsor a fellowship of Christian athletes, as an example.
Okay.
That's the one that comes to my mind.
Okay, but if somebody wanted to organize, you know, a Muslim club or a Christian club,
Right,
would
so-
they be allowed?
Right, so just to clarify, typically those are offered prior to the start of school or after the school day, student organized and student initiated and sponsored. That's probably the best answer I can give you on that right now.
So basically, yes, they could, provided they organize it after school?
Student driven.
Student driven, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I don't know if Dr. Arlotto wants to clarify.
Well, it's also something, it's not something that we can support per se. So we can't support any single religion. And so, but students are so to use your example, if there's going to be a Muslim club and they want to meet after school, they certainly can use our space to do that. We'll have to have an adult there to make sure that the students are safe, but we can't sponsor it, we can't plan a curriculum, we can't plan the implementation, but we can oversee it in terms of making sure that the students are safe.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gilliland?
Thank you, Madam President. It's just a question for clarification. So C1 says extracurricular programs are voluntary activities for students that are offered beyond the regular school day. And I guess just for clarification purposes for high schools, we've got a number in the county that, you know, Wildcat Hour, Night Hour at North County or Arundel. Those are within the school day, and students have the opportunity, because there's no activity buses in many cases, to engage in activities, but that's within the school day. So is this policy handcuffing us in any way, or is the verbiage okay as it's prepared?
No, I think that's a good point that you brought up, and we probably need to amend some language before it comes back to second reading, because that was not contemplated by this language. So, yeah, thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, so this will go, Jessica, do you think you'll amend it and then post it for 30 days?
Yes, we can make the amendment
Okay.
before posting, because I think that's an easy amendment to address. Yes.
Okay, great. Item 4.13, student parking at high schools code JGA.
The Office of School Performance brings policy JGA to you for first reading. The policy was last updated June 21st, 2006. This updated policy and regulation established procedures concerning the allocation of student parking spaces at our high schools. The policy will be posted on our website for 30 days for public comment, and we will answer any questions you have related to it at this time.
Mr. Gilliland.
Thank you again, Madam President. And by the way, on the last comment, I had to work in Night Hour and Wildcat Hour just for my seatmate here, so I was fair to Arundel. So,
and I appreciate that.
On this one, though, where we specify, again, this is C1, the Associate Superintendent for School Performance, in particular, mentioned in the policy. I'm just always a little concerned if we're designating, and nothing against her because she's great, but when we're designating members of the superintendent's executive team in policy as org charts evolve and positions, titles change, for instance, so I'm wondering if you would be open to a friendly amendment that just says superintendent or designee, and then we can leave the regulation for the superintendent to designate who that person ought to be.
I think we certainly can talk about that. I want to make sure that we absolutely, if we're going to do that we include designee, because I'm not handling parking decals for high school students. I just don't have the time for that. But I appreciate the offer, but I cannot take on parking also. I'm putting my foot down, Mr. Gillen. But yeah, I think we certainly could talk about that, absolutely. But thank you.
And we'll put the friendly amendment up before it's posted so the public can see it that way as well.
Okay. Ms. Sasso.
Okay, also on the parking, just a question. The availability, since obviously we do not have enough parking for the seniors. I remember when my son was in Broadneck, it was basically on a lottery basis. Is that designated how it's going to be awarded by the principals of every school or by the school itself, or do we in the policy and the regulation determine how it's going to be?
Right, so fortunately, I think for school principals, we're pretty uniform on this, and this is some of the changes that we're recommending to the regulation. So there would be a lottery so that every school is handled the same way, and in the regulation on page 2 of 2, number 5, it sort of goes through what that lottery would look like. So there's a priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, and priority 4.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, so this will get posted as well.
Yes.
Item 4.14, policy JG, student fees, fines, and charges.
And we have
Hi, good morning. Michelle Batten, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction.
the Division of Curriculum and Instruction and the Office of School Performance bring policy JG to you for first reading. The policy was last updated May 20th, 1991. The updated policy provides guidance regarding allowable student instructional fees, fines, and charges. The policy will be posted on our website for 30 days for public comment, and we will answer any questions you have at this time.
Ms. Sasso.
My question basically addresses financial inability to pay a fee. What is the standard that we use to pay, to classify them?
So I'll field that question because it actually ties to the last policy. If we have a student who either is receiving free and reduced meals or has another documented need, that's actually tied to the previous parking policy, because those are the funds that we typically tap in order to cover the students so they have the same opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about fees for classes that are mandatory for graduation. For example, like if a biology has to be taken and passed in order to graduate from high school. I know when my children were coming through the system, they were charged fees at some of their schools for biology lab supplies. And I just have an issue with something that's a mandatory class versus I chose to take chorus and I got to buy my sheet music.
So we have a work group reviewing all of those currently right now, so we will be coming out with set guidelines and we will be supporting schools with those requirements.
So you're supporting schools financially so they don't have to charge fees? Is that what you're saying?
We're looking into that as to exactly what that would be and how we're going to handle that at the school level.
Okay.
And also if I could jump in, there's a concern. So use biology as an example. One biology teacher at Broadneck High School may choose to do dissections of a particular animal, and a teacher at South River might not do that. And so the fees for, and so how are we going to standardize those fees across all the schools across the same content are things that that we're going to have to try and struggle with. So do we mandate that it must be a dissection of X, or that one teacher wants to read this text versus another text, and we want to be able to give the teacher some choice as they go through the curriculum, how they want to engage the kids. But that also could constitute a different kind of fee if they're, and it really has to do with consumables, right? Those things that we can use from year in and year out are not things we would charge for, but if it's a consumable, say in a tech ed class where a student is doing some building and construction, then they might be charged a small fee. But we need to at least make sure that it is manageable for the students and that we can cover the students that that aren't unable to pay. But we do need to clarify across all of our schools, for our teachers and our schools as well as our parents and students, need to clarify what some of those fees will be and why.
Yeah, I'm really hesitant about fees for mandatory classes, because even though students can identify themselves and ask for those fees, that's something where I'm going to have to identify myself. I'm going to have to, let my classmates or possibly people in the school know that I'm struggling financially, and it becomes an equity issue, and I'm concerned about that. Mrs. Birch.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with Mrs. Korbelak about that. I mean, I don't think that I'm looking for a standardized fee on a class like biology. I'm looking at for no fee on a class like biology, because especially if it's a graduation requirement, why would we be charging a fee to all of our students for a class like biology? Something like tech ed you can get around because, a student could certainly make something and then not bring it home, because you could reuse the pieces. If they were building something, they could reuse them and not bring the supplies home. You have ways around that in a class like tech ed, because, if you're buying your supplies because you're going to bring your project home, then you're going to bring it home. But if you're not going to bring it home, if you don't pay for it, then you don't bring it home. So, I mean, there are ways around something like that. But yeah, I have a bit of concern about a class like biology that's required for everyone to graduate.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Good morning, Ken Bing from Crofton. Just listening to the discussion going back and forth, was hoping that part of that is widened to include potentially a PTA, PTSO assistance if they're able, as well as finding other resources that are outside of the regular school budget of companies or so forth that may be able to help in those areas. And I really do hope, my main focus on my coming up to the question is that I would always want the teacher to have the most control of that, and not a top down, but actually from the teacher up. So if one school, as Mr. Arlotto has referred to, is going to do the frog and the other one's going to do something that's less expensive, that those teachers have that creative ability still in place and not being dictated how it's going to be standardized, because I think that's essential to who teachers are. And so whatever they could do at the local level, meaning that school cluster or high school or whatever, would be, I think would be maybe a bottom-up approach on how to approach that, and what works for one school may be different than works for another school. And so that's just a comment that I wanted to add in. Thank you.
Thank you. So this one will get posted for 30 days as well. Yes. Item 4.15 is policy IF, curriculum guides and course outlines.
The Division of Curriculum and Instruction bring policy IF to you for first reading. This policy was last updated January 17th, 1990. The updated policy and new regulation provide a process to create, manage, and implement school system approved courses and curriculum. This policy will be posted on our website for 30 days, and we'll answer any questions you have at this time.
I don't have any board questions. Are there any public questions or comments? All right, we'll post that one. And our last first reading is Advanced Learners Programs Code, IFE.
And I'm just going to have the panel introduce themselves also.
I'm Ainsley Tatro from Advanced Learner Programs and Primary Talent Development.
Good morning, Don Counts, Coordinator of Advanced Learning.
The Division of Advanced Studies and Programs brings policy IF to you for first reading. This policy was last updated May 15, 2013. The updated policy and regulation establishes guidelines to ensure that gifted and talented students are appropriately identified and receive services to develop their maximum potential. This policy will be posted on our website for 30 days for public comment, and we'll answer any questions you have related to it at this time.
I don't have any board questions. Is there any public comment? All right, we will Post it for 30 days.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is an information to action item, item 4.17, the George Cromwell Elementary School Revitalization and Addition Schematic Design. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of the George Cromwell Elementary School Revitalization and Addition Schematic Design.
Second.
We have a presentation.
Small one. For the record, Lisa Seaman Crawford, Director of Facilities. Welcome new board members. And with me?
Larry Alberts, the Supervisor of Planning, Design, and Construction.
And Jeff Hagan with Horde Copeland Mott Architects.
In November 2013, the educational specifications for George Cromwell were approved by the board, followed by their selection of the revitalization option during the feasibility study presentation in March 2014. The next step in the design process is the approval of the schematic design documents. Before I continue, I just want to thank the principal, Kathy Maxa, and all the members of the design team for their valuable input into the design process. The purpose of schematic design documents is to develop a scheme that defines the general scope and conceptual design of the project. It sets room locations, relationship between programs, building components, and circulation patterns for both the site and the building. And Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk everyone through.
If everyone could turn to page 43, if you want to look at the book and not on the screen. I'm going to walk you through each of what's existing, what we're proposing, and hopefully I will take care of it. Remember, this is a revitalization, and in revitalization we try to keep as much of the existing structure of the building in place. So some things like room sizes may not meet the ed spec, maybe slightly smaller, and always within 10%, they may be smaller. That is part of what we're doing on that scheme. So when you're seeing things that don't look quite right, that may help a little bit. Thanks. But didn't pick up on it. The site plan, for those who may be unfamiliar with the school, it sets up right next to I-97 up on the north part of the county, off of entrance off of Wellham Road. I'm going to say, can we go to the next page? No, she's going to go back. We'll figure it out. So currently the school built in the early 60s, and it comes off of the parking is all off of that road. The play fields are on the back side of the site. I'm hoping she gets to the she'll get it. 43. We'll go to 44 actually. All kinds of technical difficulties this morning. 2 more sheets. One more. There we go. So, this is the proposed site plan. We are looking at relocating the main entrance for parents and buses off from Wellham onto Olin Drive. There would still be access off of Wellham for the services to the school, as well as a parent or a teacher parking lot on the one side. We have to come off of Olin Road. We've divided the buses from the parent drop-off area and the parent parking, which is they do not currently have. The lighter area where you see classrooms is the existing school. So we're looking at doing an addition on to the right as you're looking at it, which would be the admin, the cafeteria, gym, music, very large volume spaces. This is going to be a phased construction project. So we looked at it. We're thinking we're going to need some temporary classrooms, and that's why up at the top where it says temporary portable, that's to help for swing space. The entire project is going to be similar to what's happening at Benfield, where we built the addition, and then we worked on various parts of the school to renovate. So if you're familiar with that, that's what you're seeing here. Okay. The play fields generally are going to stay where they are in the same general area. There is a new play area up by the teacher parking area. That is primarily for the early childhood area. Okay. The next page is the existing school, just to get you familiar with it. It's a lot of them. The entrance is just below where the multipurpose room is. Admin is that lighter green area. And then we have classrooms generally all spread on both wings. Many of the classrooms are going to stay where they are, and we'll be doing some expansion as you go to the next page, which is what we're proposing to actually make the changes on. So if you come in from the bottom of the drawing, there's a new vestibule, security vestibule, just like we do in all the schools. To the right side is the before and after care space, the community space we provide in the schools. To the left is the admin. So you come into the front vestibule, through the admin, and then come back into the school. That's all in the new area. You'd continue going back. There's 2 new learning studios we've introduced them this year to help with the EEE program, science. They're flexible spaces. They open onto the courtyard that'll be created by this. Go down the hall to the left a little bit further. You have the health room, followed by classrooms. And at the very end of the wing, we have the early education area. Those rooms will be adjusted to have the correct size. Right now they're smaller rooms. They will have them, and we've incorporated bathrooms in there. Again, as a revitalization, we don't put bathrooms in every classroom if they're an existing space. As you go back toward the old gym area, we'll have a new art room, which again opens up onto that courtyard, which we're looking for outdoor education opportunities. You continue back toward the media center. It's going to be in the gym. This has worked well at Belvedere, Benfield, which is where we're currently putting that. It's a very large volume space. Head back down to the right. Most of that is the existing classroom spaces. We are adding restrooms, though, throughout the facility to get the counts proper. You enter the new building roughly where the 2 dark blue spaces are. I'll give you colors as opposed to the rest. And then you see pretty much the same kind of thing you see in our new schools, where you have the music department behind the cafeteria, which has a platform, and the gym. The gym is planned to be a 6,000 square foot community gym. And with that, I will leave up any questions you may have.
Mrs. Hummer?
The early childhood classes that are here, these are all kindergartens, not pre-K?
We're planning right now, we're looking at 1 pre-K and 3 K.
Okay, is there currently pre-K at the school?
Currently, K and pre-K are at Ferndale.
Okay, thank you.
I have a bathroom question. We're adding some bathrooms. Are these gender-neutral single-stall bathrooms, or are they male-female multi-stall bathrooms?
They're group bathrooms. So there's a male bathroom that has several stalls and urinals, and the same would be, well, you wouldn't have urinals in the women's, but you have women's. So no, they're not single gender.
Are any of the bathrooms in the building going to be single gender one-stall bathrooms?
Yeah.
We do have several that are currently designated for staff use, but could be designated however is appropriate.
I think we should plan for that.
And then we also have them in the, obviously, early education and special ed classrooms. We are adding bathrooms to those areas.
Mrs. Hummer?
So the students will remain in the school as this is all going along and just be moved around as appropriate. And when do we expect construction to begin?
We're hoping next summer.
As long as it's funded.
As long as it's funded.
Mr. Gilliland?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you. I think this is great, and thank you for your firm being part of this. I'm familiar, just from a prior life, it took forever to get sidewalks on Wellham, and I know they're there now. But as the front of the school shifts to Olin Drive, and I just don't know enough about Olin Drive to know if sidewalks exist. I know that's sometimes not always in the purview of the school system, but I'm just curious how walkers are going to adapt, because this area does draw a number of walkers to and from the school.
We'll certainly study that. I don't have the exact answer now, but we will make sure that our civil engineer addresses that concern. And if we need to add sidewalks, we'll add them where appropriate, for sure.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Next, we have some review items. Item 5.01 is the construction status report.
We don't have a
We don't have any presentations. Are there any questions from the board on any of these items? Any public comment? Alrighty. 5.02 is award of contracts, also a review item. Are there any board questions or comments? Is there any, Mrs. Birch?
Can you remind me what Tim's is?
For the record, Alex Sheknov is Chief Operating Officer. TIMS is an acronym for the Technology in Maryland Schools Initiative. It's an MSDE-sponsored program to provide connectivity into classrooms. Specifically, this initiative is designed to allow sufficient electrical outlets in the classrooms to support the data connections so that it eliminates things like extension cords, tripping hazards, etc. So it's to bring both sufficient quantity of power and to get the distribution appropriate to each and every classroom. And we do receive partially funded by the state and partially funded by the county for these projects.
Any public comment on this item? Okay. Our last review item is 5.03, redistricting. So just as a bit of background, with the capital budget approval and the MGT study and looking at space in our schools as we've constructed new schools, the board wanted to undertake a discussion on whether it was time to address some of these available space with redistricting, whether that's at a particular cluster or a number of schools. And I just want to kind of open up the dialogue and see if this next school year is the time to begin forming a committee to redistrict. Mrs. Birch?
I mean, I have some particular thoughts and some broad thoughts, and I think I'll start with my broad thoughts. Anne Arundel County has not been known as a place where we redistrict very often, in large part because of how the community feels about redistricting. In fact, most of our redistricting has always been within feeder systems. So, like, if you go to Arundel, then you pretty much always go to Arundel. There have been some rare exceptions to that. In fact, the community where I live, Seven Oaks, was redistricted from Arundel High School to Meade High School, and that was a very unusual thing to happen in this county. Other counties that we have been often told to emulate, like Howard County, unless you live right next door to a high school, you don't know where you're going to high school because they redistrict all the time to make the most use of their space. They're redistricting every 2 and 3 years. And it's shifting all the time. In fact, the kids who go to one elementary school might go to 2 middle schools, and the kids from that middle school might go to 2 different high schools. There's no pattern to it. But they make the most of every single seat in their district. It was mentioned recently that some of our problems could be solved by our funders. Our funders mentioned if we would just redistrict more. And maybe that is something that we should be looking at rather than building so much. We have a rather big capital budget plan for the next 10 years. And a lot of it has to do with high schools. But we have about 900 empty seats at 2 high schools in particular. And I'm wondering if, in a broader sense, it would make sense to use our county's money wisely to start shifting students to those seats in those empty high schools so that either we don't need to build as much in terms of high schools, or we can build smaller high schools as the county executive has asked us to do, rather than larger high schools when, again, there are empty seats. For instance, I think, and I'm not positive, there are about 600 empty seats at Chesapeake High School. Now, obviously, you can't take students from Arundel High School and put them at Chesapeake. So it's something that would have to be moved gradually. You'd have to move students from Severna Park and Northeast to Chesapeake. And then you'd have to move students from the next school over there. And you'd have to gradually do it. But we are supposed to be stewards of the county's money, and we need to do what's right for the whole county. And I think this is a conversation that we as a school board and our community need to have. People don't like to pay taxes. We know that very well and very clearly. So if we're not to spend as much money and we need to use money wisely, then we need to take advantage of the empty seats. And one of the best ways that we can do that is by starting to move students into the 600 empty seats at Chesapeake and into the 300 or so empty seats at Southern, which would mean moving students from South River to Southern and then continuing that move on. And that's a broad discussion that we as a community need to begin to have. We can't assume that because I bought a house in the Arundel School District. My kids are not districted for the Arundel School District. I think people in Anne Arundel County just assume that's the way that it is and that's the way that it always should be. Well, Howard County, everyone says, great school system. When you buy a house in Howard County, you do not know where you're going to high school. You have no idea, unless you live right next door to the high school. I think that it's something we need to start thinking about because we are not making the most of the empty seats in our district. And it's not a smart way to do business. And I just kind of want to know what other people have to say about that.
Ms. Sasso.
To say, following with Teresa, that it's not only one issue that we have to look at as we're looking at redistricting. There's 2 points that I have. You know, if we do shift, if we are taking children from one location to the next Chesapeake, you know, whatever it is, we are looking at extra buses. We also have at hand the issue that we are looking at the start school late, that we need new buses. So whatever we do will have a repercussion in everything that is going to be done. So when the issue of relocation or redistributing is being done, it has to be a complete plan with the whole community involved. The second, since I represent District 30, which is Annapolis, we also have the question now whether Monarch School will be able to operate or not because of some opposition, let's put it that way. That is another area that basically we have to look at because that would take off the burden on Tyler's school, putting other children in the Monarch School. So when we speak about issues on the board, we also need the community to be involved so that when a final plan is set, the community has basically expressed their opinion and we have a full agreed issue. And if we redistrict, will we need more teachers? Will we need less teachers? So, you know, we are having quite a lot of issues to really look at.
Dr. Frank?
Thank you very much. I would like to try to be as succinct as I can here, which is to say let's get the community involved in this. When the subject of redistricting, quote unquote, is mentioned, it gets people upset. So I'd like to get the community involved in this as soon as possible. And MGT has been helpful in this, and then we can decide what's appropriate for the community.
Dr. Frank, when and if we choose to redistrict or explore redistricting, we would form a parent committee. I believe it's 2 parents from each school that might be affected would participate, and then they would bring forth recommendations to us. We could look at those recommendations. Actually, they would bring them to the superintendent, and he would make his recommendation. The committee might have a different recommendation than the superintendent. We could decide of all of their recommendations we like option number 3, or perhaps some conglomeration of them, and we want to put forth our own proposal and take it back out for public comment. But there's an opportunity for the families that are in those schools to weigh in and present to us.
Since this subject matter has been brought to the school board's attention and now to the public, are there plans to redistrict within a particular time frame?
Not at this point, but that's what we're talking about today.
Then I think that's important for the public to know.
So I'm hearing Chesapeake Southern empty seats of concern and Annapolis. Now, I know Ms. Sasso talked about Monarch. I believe there's also about 300 empty seats at Rolling Knolls. Is that correct still? At least until we know about fall enrollment? About 300?
Yes, there was an increase in seats with the construction, yes.
And we have some elementary schools near Rolling Knolls that are kind of bursting at the seams, like Germantown and Mills Parole, perhaps, would be the closest to Rolling Knolls. So I guess we have some options about either forming a committee to look at Annapolis elementary schools and redistricting them. If Monarch opens, it would open in the fall of 2017, but we would be accepting applications this fall to Monarch. So we would at least be able to see who's applying and interested in coming to Monarch. We would also know with our September 30th counts if perhaps some families have come back from private school or parochial school and started to attend Rolling Knolls now that it's a brand new school. We'd have better numbers, I guess, in the fall to December kind of time frame for Annapolis Elementary.
Is there a possibility of basically opening it now for a committee for, say, February next year, so that we can
Yes,
start?
absolutely. Ms. Hummer.
When was the last time that Annapolis was redistricted? Do we know?
It came before us a couple years ago, 2 years ago, and we decided to hold off because we knew or were aware that we were pursuing a contract school, and also that we were hopeful that construction would be approved and that Rolling Knolls was still under construction. But I don't know before that when the last time is that we shuffled Annapolis. Yeah.
So nothing has been, so it was kind of put on hold a couple of years ago to wait, with the new construction opening and see what the openings would be. I share Ms. Burge's thoughts on the high schools, that we have a number of high schools. We have 2 high schools that are significantly under them. One concern I would raise just for us all to consider is we do have Crofton High School that will be opening in 3 years. And at that time, we will be doing some major high school redistricting at that time, because that will shift a lot of things. So one thing for us to consider is, do we want to tackle some high school things now, or do we want to wait and do it all at one time when we have it? That's just food for thought.
Mrs. Burge.
2 questions on 2 topics. On the high school issue, that may be appropriate. I just want to start getting the conversation out there about high schools, because I think that everyone for too long has thought that high school redistricting is not a possibility for them. And I think people need to realize that it is a possibility, because we need to make the best use of all of our seats. And I think people just in general, our citizens, need to know that if we're going to be responsible stewards of the dollar, we need to be responsible stewards of the dollar. We can't just pretend like it. And what's unfortunate is that most people think, well, be responsible except for when it comes to my school. Spend a lot of money on my school and keep my kid in my school, but worry about it somewhere else. Well, we can't do that. We really can't do that. We have over 80,000 kids going to school in this county, And, you know, your kid is one of them or 5 of them, you know, whatever. But we've got a whole lot of kids to worry about, making sure that they're going to school in a good place. And, you know, I have to worry about all of them. We have to worry about all of them. On the elementary school issue in Annapolis, I do have a question about, I know that we're moving forward with the Tyler Heights project. At what point would the state be approving that project with a number of students that go there? Because I know that there is concern that if we redistricted too soon in Annapolis, that if we districted some students out of Tyler Heights, that they may not approve the project for the number of students that are there now, or might not see the need for as many students. So at what point in time would the state have said, okay, this is how many seats you need there, and you can move forward, and then we could say, okay, now we can redistrict? I guess that's my question for the superintendent or for Alex. I mean, I know, because I know at some point they say okay, and then you could move on.
For the record, Alex Sheknov, Chief Operating Officer. Logistically, it's our intention, upon the adoption of the contracts that went forward today, that we would be undertaking a feasibility study for example, Tyler Heights Elementary School, kicking that off here this summer with an ability to complete that project and get it remitted to the state essentially by November, in time for the state to consider that project in December. The finalization of the state's review does not become official and final until the Board of Public Works acts in May, which is after the conclusion of the General Assembly's activities. So the final determination of what SRC that school would be eligible for, as well as the state's concurrence of whether that school would be a candidate for renovation, revitalization, modernization, replacement, all of that comes to a conclusion in May when the Board of Public Works will vote.
So in that case then, redistricting Tyler Heights may not be appropriate this year, but maybe next year. Is that?
Well, I think a big piece about Tyler Heights is what's going to happen with our contract school.
Okay.
Right, because my part of my concern would be giving data to a committee to start to make the consideration, when then we find out that, and we don't know the number, but possibly maybe 300 families or 200 students would want to leave Tyler Heights and go to the Monarch, if that goes through for the 17-18 school year, and that would then adjust the enrollment numbers at the school, which would then adjust the conversations among a redistricting committee, if that makes sense.
Okay. Trying to think process.
I think, whether we redistrict or not, Tyler Heights could still lose students before the IRC has made their final decision based on Monarch. So the size that Tyler Heights might be today without a Monarch could be very different from the size that Tyler Heights is going to be with a Monarch. I think the issue is that our current regulations timeline for redistricting doesn't really fit very well with the data that we need for Annapolis. We would probably need to push the timeline down a little bit so that we would have the data from Monarch as much as we could get, and perhaps tighten the window where we announce to the public what the plan is, have the public hearing, and then come back for a vote, as long as we still voted by the end of April, so that families could be prepared for the fall. But maybe we're not going to be ready to have a superintendent's recommendation, and the regulation says December right now.
Correct.
So that would probably be a little too early for the recommendation, but maybe early February we'd have a lot more data. And the other question I have, or comment I have, Teresa, about the high school conversation, I realized that if we were going to move some students from South River to Southern, that would help South River for a few years, but Crofton is also going to help South River alleviate the crowdedness. But what effect is Crofton going to have on Chesapeake High School? Northeast and Severna Park students are not going to be coming to Crofton. So Crofton opens, you know, maybe this isn't the year to look at Southern, but maybe it's the year to look at Chesapeake. Don't know. Mr. Graydon.
First time asking a question here, so pardon me if I don't get it right. Just to understand, are there, when you say redistricting, which to my ear sounds like that means kind of moving students basically on a non-voluntary basis, are there programmatic changes that the superintendent is going to consider to attract students to those empty seats at a school before we look at potentially just moving children?
So that's a wonderful question. It is a, so you use the term involuntary, so redistricting by its nature is involuntary. You, the board, have that obligation by law to set the boundaries per school. But then there's sort of involuntary redistricting, which is your point about programs. So as we've built programs of choice, whether it's the BEMA program at Glen Burnie High School, or our STEM programs at North County and South River, or our PVA at Performing Visual Arts at Broadneck and Annapolis, those are where now, without you making those decisions, those are parents and students making decisions to redistrict themselves, to use that terminology. And so that has been occurring. We've been doing that now for almost 10 years through our programs of choice. Our charter and contract schools, and now the new Monarch, will be part of that. We certainly are making some considerations with regard to, in this terms of this conversation that you're having with Chesapeake High School. Yes. So there are some considerations about, are we going to be building, what's going to be our next program of choice? And certainly Chesapeake High School is something that we have been talking about as a team, as a staff, as a possibility of a program of choice that may then attract students, if that's to answer your question. So yes.
Yeah, I guess if I'm phrasing it in the right way, what I would hope, and this is a personal view, is that there would always be some kind of programmatic consideration before the school system went to the decision to say, okay, we're simply going to redistrict students, because obviously, you know, families with multiple children have ties to certain schools, siblings went there, that kind of thing, and if there are things that we can do to have people, you know, redistrict voluntarily, to use your term, you know, that's a much more palatable option for families.
Agreed, and that's the way I present it that way. So I very much, Mr. Grant, appreciate your question, but also understanding, and the board fully understanding, that there's no guarantee, right? When you redistrict, there's a guarantee that we're going to move X number of seats to Y school, right? And then we can feel comfortable that the building and the utilization, to use Mrs. Burge's terms, the utilization is being used effectively. When we go through programs of choice and programmatic, there's no guarantee. We have some history that shows that people are taking us up on our offers of our wonderful programs. But what also has happened with a number of our programs of choice is that not only have some of our students moved from within, but now we've drawn students back into the school system from the private and homeschooling sectors, which has increased our overall enrollment. Our overall enrollment in the past 10 years, you know, has gone from 73,000 to over 81,000.
Mrs. Burge.
And I am obviously a big fan of our programs of choice, but the other issue with getting the shift in enrollment through a program of choice is that a program of choice costs money, whereas redistricting is just a matter of moving the kids. I mean, every program of choice that we do has a price tag. It's an extra program with a cost. So whereas kids going to a different high school, you know, if you need fewer teachers at this high school and more teachers now at this high school, you just shift the teachers, and the buses now go, instead of going to this high school, they go to that high school, and you know, so there's not the same kind of cost differential. Whereas if you're pulling kids into a magnet, now you have more magnet buses, now you have additional staff, Now, it's a different additional cost, whereas if you're just redistricting, it's probably not completely cost neutral, but pretty close to it.
I know that the 4 years that I've been on the board, when redistricting's come up, the answer was always, we're building more schools, let's wait. Keep waiting, we're building more schools, but we're always going to be building more schools. And I really think it's time to address a school that has 600 empty seats and an elementary school that has 300 empty seats. It's just not being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. Is there any public comment on this item?
I'm Claudia O'Keefe, Old Mill parent, Old Mill District parent. I support redistricting. I think a comprehensive look at the county is well overdue. We have a number of schools, one school in particular that was redistricted not too long ago, Central Elementary, was looking at their student population going over 800, which is well over capacity. It was redistricted. It worked very well. Now they're under 700, I believe, for student population. That was one school district, but we have similar problems countywide, not just in Annapolis, but Annapolis is another very good example. And listening to the board members talk, I hear a lot of talk about how we're going to do it, how to redistrict, what schools could do with more students, what could do with less. And that's the beginnings of doing the getting the redistricting group together. So I think just listening to you, we're already primed to do this. I think this is a very, very important thing to do. We have Mead Heights Elementary, where two geographically separate areas feed into one school. They're not walkable, which I think is a very important thing to get, is walkable schools. We have Old Mill Middle North, where the school itself is not in the same geographical area as the students that feed into it. And I think there are a lot of situations like that around the county where it would really, really help. I think it would be better for families in a lot of ways if we could look at what students go to what schools and make it better. I think really it's long overdue. Thank you.
Hi, Ken Bing, Crofton. My daughter is a magnet or a PVA student, and so we have experienced actually 3 different schools in the county: Crofton, Bates, and now Broadneck. And the socioeconomic differences between those 3 is pretty amazing and very different. Every cluster is very different, and there's no broad brush that can be applied to every one of your students in the 80,000 that you have. There's just no way. Coming from Michigan, where the people had a little bit more say on who was on the board, and if you wanted to pass and build a new school, you'd have to ask us because we were paying the bill, and you'd have to submit that to us in a millage, and then we would have to approve that. This is very different, where you have a lot of power that I personally, as an individual, don't think you should have, but that's really not my, I don't have any control over that. But that said, you have an extreme privilege to be in a position to decide where people's families are going to go to school. They've invested their money and their time and placed themselves somewhere in the county. I will tell you that I would not have moved to Crofton had I known that for the last 10 plus years you split the kids for high schools. You put them together in a middle school and then you split them up. And you haven't changed that over 10 years. So I do hear a little bit of what Ms. Teresa is saying and in the regards of making change a little bit more fluid. At the same time, I think the magnet programs have been excellent programs in being able to fill seats. And the more that they're attractive, the more people are going to do it. And they're a plus. I mean, we pay extra money too for our kid to go to those different schools. There are days that we have to drive. There's different events that are going on. There's still, when there's extra activities at the school, I drive from Crofton to Broadneck. When there's an event going on, I drive from Crofton to Broadneck. So there is an extra expense being held by the parents that make that decision, but it is voluntary. That said, I think some of the things that I don't know are taken into consideration, but proof positive was when Nantucket opened up and it filled up a lot sooner than you anticipated. It appears that nobody took into account that renters are very fluid. And when you open up a new school and say it's a good school, guess what's going to happen? I watched the apartment complex go from mainly adults to almost all families because they want to be just like every other family in a school district or area where the schools are being talked at as being well. So that's going to make a difference. I think, real quick here, I think that the point of choice is important. I think the most important thing should not be filling seats, but what education is being given to the students are there, regardless of how many empty seats are sitting in there. Maybe mothballing one of the high schools and having it rented out for something else maybe is a better alternative than trying to move people into seats, because that would also be a cost savings too. And the difference in cost between an empty seat at a school and putting a PVA or magnet kit in it, what is the difference of that? Because I don't think it's much, because your seat's empty and you're paying a bill for an empty seat. When you fill it with someone else like that, I believe that there's that difference is a lot smaller. So thank you very much for hearing my point.
Good morning, Richard Benford, President of the Teachers Association of Anne Arundel County. I just wanted to bring up a point that I think is missing. Chesapeake has a lot of empty seats, but it's also down a very long peninsula. If there was a bridge across the river through Gibson Island, then that might help, but there isn't. So I think that's part of the reason there is a huge number. So anybody who would be transported there from somewhere else is going to be traveling quite a long time. And as a teacher, kids are already coming in tired, and long bus rides are not something I think our students would benefit from. So that's just something to consider. I think the west side, Crofton, that will help alleviate some things. The geography is different. You mentioned Howard County. The geography is way different. Of course, they're going to redistrict a lot because they can. And the moving from place to place is a lot easier. And if you've ever tried to drive down Mountain Road in the morning or afternoon against, the traffic, it's not a pleasurable experience. Ritchie Highway, congested. I mean, everywhere we go, our roads are congested. So our infrastructure really can't even handle what we have now. So this issue is a bigger issue. It's more of a state and county funding issue for infrastructure as well. So we'll be talking to some folks and see what their ideas are about that infrastructure, and maybe they'll partner with the schools to do something about that as well. So thank you for allowing me to speak, and I look forward to meeting Mr. Grannon and Ms. Williams. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Rita Vasquez again. I thank you for the opportunity to even hear this discussion. It's amazing. I don't think most parents realize what they're missing out on. When I hear redistricting, I think people are thinking busing from different areas. I hear it as enlarging the boundaries to that specific school. So to me, that makes sense. All for magnet programs, my daughter went through the PVA. It's amazing if that is the program for your child. It is a huge expense and toll, I think, in our county budget. And we see movement every year because it is optional. You may have to commit for that year, but the student doesn't have to go back the next. And in some events have been kicked out of the program. So that's still an option. Just because you present a magnet program to say the school that you're trying to bring students in, that doesn't mean those kids are going to be committed for 4 years. So the magnet should not be the draw to the school, because I see it every year. I'm also a county employee, so I see the movement to where parents are almost shopping around for a school. And it's frustrating for me because you have to give that school a chance. I heard the negativity about Glen Burnie High School in Corcoran, and I didn't want my daughter in Corcoran. Got her in Chesapeake Science. That wasn't a fit for her. Corcoran was amazing. It was the best opportunities for her. Our feeder school, I'm glad she got to experience it. We supported it. We're in high school, Glen Burnie, heard the negativity. That's our homeschool. We're going to try it, and you make the most of it. They have an issue here or there, but that's high school. And I'm proud to say that they went through our feeder system. My hope is to see parents, instead of focusing on the negativity, which we're going to see a lot of, bring something to the table. My concern now, and it's not our feeder school, is MacArthur. And one of the options that I see is, why not split it into a north, south, east, west, like Old Mill? It is a huge middle school, and we're constantly hearing so much negativity about MacArthur, yet I'm also hearing great things from other parents with great experiences. Now they're maybe going there for the IB program. But even if you're not in that program, it is a great school, and it can be great if we just hear what the solutions for that specific schools are. But when I hear redistricting, I just hear expanding the boundaries, not so much bringing kids from all over the place. But again, thank you for just the opportunity to hear this. I hear a lot of concern on your end, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, Lisa Shore, by the way, I just wanted to support what Mr. Grannon said in reference to programs of choice. When we're looking at redistricting high schools, our experience as a family, we had one child that went to Chesapeake High School, one child that went to IB at Old Mill, and I think we can make some of the choices about redistricting voluntary and empower parents to look for the best fit for their child in terms of the way that their child learns by doing some of the programming options. So I just wanted to publicly state support for what you said. Thank you.
Good morning. Tor Bjerknes, Southern Cluster. My children will go to Southern High School, which has open seats, which is great for us. I don't think schools should be big. I remember, when I went to school, I mean, there's more children in my son's 7th grade class than were in my complete high school, and I think that's crazy. And also, the redistricting, you're breaking up communities. Schools are communities, and also redistricting makes people travel longer. This has been an issue with the kids getting up so early to go to school as it is, and you're going to send kids from South River down to Southern, they're going to have to get up 15, 20 minutes earlier. So please consider smaller new schools. Thank you.
Mrs. Hummer?
I appreciate all the public comment, because this is definitely what we'll hear if we go forward with this. I think a big thing to stress is when we say that we want to look at redistricting, we're not saying we're going to redistrict. We're forming a panel. We will look at options and we will consider, just like with a couple of years ago with Annapolis, the choice was made not to redistrict at that time. But we do need, as Ms. Burge said, to open the discussion and begin looking at things, and so we can hear from the community and hear about all these things and try it. And then, but opening the discussion is a long way from actual redistricting or making a decision. But it's the beginning. It's what we need to do.
Is there any more board discussion? I would actually like to move that this board direct the superintendent to put in place a process outside of the normal redistricting timeline to do two things. Consider the options to redistrict the 9 elementary schools in the Annapolis cluster, taking into account enrollment at the New Monarch Annapolis Public Contract School to best utilize space in all of those facilities, and to bring a recommendation or recommendations to the board no later than February 1st, 2017. And then the board would then consider those options and perhaps some of its own before we would decide whether we're going to proceed with any plan for the 2017-18 school year. The regulation and policy says we need to make a decision by April 30th, so that would be our second meeting in April. That's my motion. Maria seconded. Mr. Grannon? Absolutely. So the Annapolis elementary schools would be Annapolis Elementary, West Annapolis, Rolling Knolls, Mills Parole, Germantown, Tyler Heights, Hillsmere, what am I forgetting? Eastport and Georgetown East. And then Monarch would be the 10th if it's going to open. Any further board discussion on the motion?
If I could add, in terms of timing, Ms. Korbelak, we probably In thinking about the enrollment timeline for our programs of choice, and in particular the Monarch School, which has been discussed, that is, as a program of choice, that lottery goes into effect. It opens October 1st through December 1st. We then send off those lotteries to a third party that does that process, and we make the announcement sometime in middle of February. Is that right? So sometime in the middle of February is when we'll have the final numbers as to how many have requested, and or if there's going to be a wait list at Monarch, among all the others, but in Monarch in particular. So in terms of timeline for the board to consider, it's really about mid-February when we would have solid numbers. Is that right?
Would we be able to get the numbers by December 1st, around December 1st before the winter break, regarding how many people applied, not necessarily how many are going to accept? Like if we had a committee that was formed in the fall, they could at least look at those preliminary numbers in December, mid-December?
I think the answer is yes. Yeah, we could get some preliminary numbers as to the numbers that have applied from the Annapolis cluster, keeping in mind that the Monarch Annapolis, it's not a charter school but a contract school, is only open to students and families in the Annapolis cluster.
And the other part of that with Monarch is that we would have to know by the time October 1st when the lottery opened that they are in fact going to open for August of 2017, correct? Or they wouldn't be a part of the lottery at all. So we'd also have that information. Mrs. Burge.
And when there will be several schools that are weighted, is that correct, in the lottery? And when will we know what those schools will be?
That'll be a determination that we'll bring to the board, that we'll have a discussion with the board. We haven't, based on the enrollment is what the board had asked for in that memorandum of understanding with the Children's Guild, that you would be able to decide, this board will be able to decide, not only will all the 9 elementary schools be optional for parents, but that we would pick those that are most in need of, where overcrowding or issues of concern, that they would be weighted. So there could be up to 3 of those.
Okay.
We have not made that decision yet until we get some enrollments going into the end of September. We've got final enrollments at all the schools.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Did you have? We're still on the Annapolis motion. Is there any public comment on the Annapolis motion? Okay. All right. All those in favor of forming the parent committee to review redistricting for the fall? Okay. Motion passes 9-0-0.
So that I can clarify, the motion that was just passed 9-0-0, I've now been directed where we will, my team and I will put together a new timeline and bring and have recommendations, the superintendent's recommendation by February 1st. Is that correct?
Correct. And that way we could have the public hearings in probably March. We would have your recommendation early February, then we would have to vote on it a couple of weeks later. And then we'd have to take it to the public in March for their feedback. And then we would have April to vote yay or nay. So it condenses the timeline that normally would have started in December and moves it to February, March, April. Mrs. Hummer?
In regards to high school redistricting, I believe that we should hold off on the high school for the current time, and perhaps look at some other program options or something that can be done for those spaces, or even just to wait until we do a comprehensive high school redistricting when Crofton High School. We could continue the conversation, but perhaps not tackle that one this year.
Okay, so we don't have a motion for that anyway. So, alrighty. The next item on the agenda are actually 4 consent items. I'd like to bundle items 6.01 to 6.04 and move them from information to action. All those in favor? Okay, we now have an action item. Dr. Olato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the Board of Education award contracts as listed on today's agenda: 6.01, 6.02, 6.03, and 6.04.
Mrs. Nally?
I just have a question for Mr. Shaknovich. I'm looking at the MBA goals and achievements. That's the minority business, and I noted that the goal for Rippling Woods and Broadneck were 15%. The achievement was 0 for Broadneck, 4.2, and I'm seeing similar in the others. And I know in the past when we've asked questions, Mr. Peterson used to be this questionnaire. I know in the past when we've asked questions about this, you have spoken to the fact of that they were unable to get that kind of because of the service required, or there were reasons. But I just thought I always like to ask that when I see that big a difference.
Certainly, Alex Shakno, Chief Operating Officer. So in the cases, for example, 6.01, it is for the design and construction of just a roof, which is a single element of a building. Unless you were going to hire two or three firms to say, okay, you design one wing, I'll design one wing, I'll design a canopy. There's really not an opportunity in a single component replacement design to really parse out the designs, which is very much different than, for example, if we're talking about designing Crofton High School that has many elements, many different engineering disciplines, many different testing and inspection elements. So there are a lot of opportunities to take that design package and parse it out to different firms and aggregate MSB participation. But it's very difficult if you're designing just one specific piece that doesn't have other collateral pieces to it that you could separate out and subcontract out. So unfortunately, that's the tale of the matter with the roof replacements. You'll see again that they are a single discrete component being designed by a single discrete firm that has expertise in roofing designs.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 900. I just have one announcement. The next Board of Education meeting will be on Wednesday, August 17th at 10 a.m. So we will be taking a 5-week hiatus, but we'll be back and see you time to open schools in August. And Mrs. Summer.
All right. I move that we go to closed meeting to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, and any other personnel matter that affects one or more individuals, to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice on a legal matter, and to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to the negotiations.
All those in favor? All right, the public portion of the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.